look at this. This is words. This is a lot of words. And these words feel and read the way they do for very specific reasons. Typography is a very intentional thing, and there is a lot more to it than you would ever think about. Let's take a look at Stray. You're a cute little cat in this game, and the whole world is very cyber, it's very colorful, lots of neon lights. You're in an abandoned and overgrown society that's now lived in by robots. When these robots talk to you, it looks like this. Pause. Okay, what are we looking at? Doesn't this font feel techie and modern? Like, it fits the world. But why? How? Well, this font is actually considered to be something called sans serif, which means it does not have serifs. Serifs are the little lines that hang off the edges of your letters. Fonts that have serifs generally feel like they have age or wisdom to it, since that's what physical books are printed with. It's pretty common in fantasy games, since you want the text to feel more settled in. So when you take away those serifs, you get something that does not feel old. You get something that feels modern and is the opposite of that serif feeling. Now, the Fallout games are also pretty futuristic and modern, but they use something called a monospace font, which basically means that all the letters individually take up the same amount of space. They're the same width. It's pretty commonly associated with that hacker, computer programmer-y aesthetic, which is also what we see in the Fallout UI. The use of brackets, the green colors, it works together beautifully. It's great. UI is its whole can of worms, and when I talk about UI, I'm referring to user interface, which is basically anything that's meant to give the player information but doesn't necessarily exist in the game world. So things like a map, your toolbar, an inventory, that's UI. This right here is the UI for this super underground small game nobody's heard of called Hollow Knight. You may notice here that a lot of the UI is based around similar styles of line work and shapes. You have these long winding lines that spiral and sometimes come to a sharp little point. We look at the title screen and this framing surrounding the name of the game, right? Lots of swirls going around this crest of a bug. You see the same aesthetic and line work all over, and it's even built into the physical world itself. So how does this relate to the font that the game uses? Well, notice two things here. First off, notice how the font is very sharp and it has these blunt serifs on the edge of the letters. And then secondly, look at the line work and how it's kind of the opposite of that. It's a lot of curvature and winding lines, and it's very fluid. Because of that contrast, your eyes are drawn to the sharp things, but it has this beautiful UI to soften it and complement it. Cult of the Lamb also does something like Hollow Knight, where you have these more curved, stylistic lineworks surrounding a sharper serifed font. There's a reason why games do this, and it's because that contrast is giving your eyes a buffer. It's introducing the text on screen, it's framing it. And it's not framing it in a way that's competing for your attention, it's framing it in a way that genuinely complements it, and it feels good to read, and it feels nice. Look at the font in Stardew Valley. Boom! This time it's the text box that has these angles to it and very sharp corners, and then the font is what's quirky and kind of has more shape to it. Beautiful, your eyes know what to look at here. Let's look again at the dialogue boxes in Stray, right? This is a complete square of a text box, and look at the letters, what are they? Oh my gosh, completely rounded at every corner in every letter. You see how it was like a super square? So instead for a font, we get a super rounded shape? Oh my gosh! It's very pleasant to look at, even if you're not consciously thinking about it, and it's very cool from a design perspective. At the end of the day, our brain isn't actively thinking about the lack of serifs in Stray and how that makes it feel modern. It just feels modern. In the same way that this feels friendly, and this feels loud, and this feels southern, and this one feels cute and dainty. You see what I mean? It's just a vibes thing. Like, the technical choices behind a font absolutely matter, but at the end of the day, especially with games, you just have to ask yourself, does this font belong in this game world? Games usually have to answer this question with varying degrees of accuracy, because a title screen that's read once is going to be more exaggerated and stylistic than UI or dialogue text that needs to be readable and fast. Look at the dialogue here in Hades. The name of the gods is this very stylistic, Greek-aged font. It's very majestic, but then the text itself in the dialogue is much more subtle. It still reads as, oh, this is aged, this is important, this is mythology, but it's not the exact same typeface because it needs to be readable. You could also think about Skyrim, right? You probably think of that title screen font or this very runic, iconic one, but neither of those are actually that common in the game. You see, this is the title screen for Skyrim, And then this is the inventory for Skyrim. You see the difference in the font here? Skyrim's UI design as a whole is truly iconic at this point, mostly for bad reasons. Is it all text, no visuals? Do I just have to brute force my way through this inventory? Yep, you do. Yeah, that's rough. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I'm not done complaining now. I want to look at an example where the font does not belong in the game world. And that example is Celeste. Okay, before you have my head on a plate, I love Celeste. Celeste is fantastic. Streamed it, 10 out of 10. Some of the most refined and fluid platforming physics I've ever seen. It's great. But I've always had a little bit of beef with the dialogue. The font feels so flat and basic, which is kind of sad for a game as multi-dimensional and beautiful as Celeste. It immediately stood out to me when I played it. I thought maybe it's because it's kind of a more generic looking font, so maybe it's recognizable, but we have had pretty successful games out there that use basic fonts. So why does it feel so out of place? Is it because it's a pixel art game with a non-pixel art font? Well, no, because look at Terraria. Terraria is a pixel art game with a handwritten font. You can't get more of a disjunction than that. Except with Terraria, the font is integrated into the world. You pick up an item, you see the font. You open your inventory, you see the font. You kill something, you see the font. You are always seeing the pixel art at the same time on screen as the font, so it doesn't feel as jarring and foreign as it does in Celeste when you go from this fully immersive, beautiful pixel art to all of a sudden flat looking words on the screen. You have to let the player's eyes warm up to two very different styles when it's something very smooth and then something very pixelated. Even with that though, I think that a different typeface just would have been better. Maybe a little bit smaller, and can we fix the margins? Because what's happening with the margins, dude? See, you have a dialogue box here that has a little middle marker with this little icon, but then the font isn't relative to that. It's going based off of where the dialogue portrait is. So you end up with text that's in the middle of nowhere and to a different margin every time you try and read it. That's a problem. It's a big problem. Anyway, love the game, hate the font, does not belong in the game world. I could say the same thing about the subtitle font in Metal Gear Solid or this iconic sign from Silent Hill 2. This is Comic Sans in a horror game, by the way. That's supposed to be scary. The remake of Silent Hill 2 actually makes fun of this though, and you can find the Comic Sans font in the trash can in-game. So that's kind of funny. There's even this 2D version, which... Wait a second. What's this? Oh, this is actually made in Game Maker. Today's sponsor. I've worked with Game Maker a lot on this channel, but it's for good reason, because it is a fast and easy to use 2D game engine used to develop lots of well-known indie games. Heck, Undertale was made using it, okay? So that says something. Even if you're a complete beginner like I used to be with very little coding knowledge, I was able to pick things up online and make some pretty cool stuff. Game Maker lets you make all kinds of games with a written or a visual scripting language and tons of built-in tools made to help you. Even game templates and pre-made asset bundles, so you can focus on what's important to you. Not to forget that there is a truly vibrant community out there online for it, so you're always able to get help when you get stuck. You can jump right into making your own game by following one of their official tutorials. They just put out this fantastic one for making a top-down RPG. Game Maker is completely free to use until you're ready to sell a game with it, and even then, it is a one-time fee. So download Game Maker using my link in the description. Where were we? Silent Hill. Silent Hill has had a pretty interesting typographical evolution over time, particularly with its logo. A lot of games will usually stick to the same type of font if they're doing a series so that you get that nostalgia and emotional appeal, but Silent Hill just wanted to try everything, man. I honestly wish that they had kept their typography a bit more consistent, because it's usually pretty cool when you're able to get that nostalgia memory feel when you play a more recent game, because it reminds you of an old one. It's kind of like if you have a book series and all the covers match, or they're like the same style. Because that's what we see with Animal Crossing, with Assassin's Creed, with Fallout, because we can so strongly associate an image to that game in our heads through the typography. And that is pretty cool. I might have bashed Celeste for its font a little bit earlier, but for a typographical logo for an individual game, it kills it, dude. It's literally a game about climbing a mountain, so the fact that it's angled upward like the text is, and then it's 3D, it gives it so much depth, and then there's snow on top of the letters, because there's snow on mountains. The letters' colors even match the way that it's shaded on the mountain, which is really cool. Just very cool design here, and this arguably matters a lot more than the dialogue since this is like the marketing behind the game. Nintendo games also do a really good job with iconic typographical logos. You can think Animal Crossing, Pokemon, Zelda. These games are actually super interesting because more times than not, the logos will be so iconic, so memorable, but then the actual dialogue and UI font is surprisingly simple and unstylized and kind of basic. This could be because Nintendo games are pretty commonly translated to other languages, so having a more generic font just makes that translation a lot easier. There's absolutely cases like Paper Mario where you immediately think of this font, but for the vast majority of recent Nintendo titles like Breath of the Wild, this looks like Helvetica. The benefit of this is that you don't read the font in a certain tone. There's this meme that went around of like this water fountain. Oh god, let's see if I can describe this. There was this picture going around a while ago of this water dispenser, and because the different words for water are in different fonts, your brain will read them differently in your head. The point is that the same thing goes for games. I wasn't gonna talk about Undertale in this video, but it's just the perfect example of what I'm trying to say, because all the characters in Undertale are named after fonts, and they all act like caricatures of that font. So Papyrus, which is this font, is very loud and boisterous and rah, you know what I mean? And then Sans has the Comic Sans meme vibe to him. So when you read the more bland fonts in Breath of the Wild, there isn't already an emotion attached to it like there is in something like Undertale. It's much easier to manipulate something neutral when you're trying to convey a wide range of tone than something that already has its own voice to it. Breath of the Wild and I think Tears of the Kingdom also use italics in a lot of their fonts, which I find interesting. And I'm not fully sure what the purpose is there, but I think it's just to further develop that neutral tone, make it even more neutral, you know, make it read a little quieter, more calm, especially when you look at the atmosphere of Breath of the Wild. You want it to read very calm, very quiet. Obviously not the entire game, but most of it. The UI also lends itself to that vision, you know? It's usually transparent backgrounds, it's very quiet, it's not the point of focus by any means. This amount of rounding is the opposite of what like a pixel art font can do, and we're gonna talk about pixel art fonts because that's a whole cool thing. You'd think that dealing with a very constrained space with pixel art when you're making a font would make all the words read the same way or all the fonts feel the same. But when you see the variety of pixel art fonts that are out there, oh my gosh, could not be more false. Look at Eastward. This feels clean, real sexy. Look at Stardew Valley. Look at Kinseed and Fields of Mystria, right? This feels friendly, this feels welcoming. And if you look close enough, they even use these little gray pixels behind the font, which is called anti-aliasing. And that actually makes it look less pixelated from afar because it's making it look rounded and shadowed. A lot of pixel art games do that, and you probably don't think about it. Like if you look at the main menu on Minecraft, if you were to get rid of the anti-aliasing pixels, it would look like this. It looks cheap, it looks a little bit fugly, and you probably didn't even realize there were shadows happening there. But anyway, look at the font in Katana Zero, right? This is colorful, this is bold, it's very loud, it has noise to it, and it's very stimulating. My point here is that there is so much flexibility with how fonts will be read, even if you're dealing with a system where every pixel matters. That is simply the beauty of typography. Pixel art fonts are more likely to struggle with readability, though, because each letter has less space to take up. I've definitely played games where it is a task and a half to figure out what the heck something is saying. Like this is Ultima 7. 6? 7? I think that's the Roman numeral for 7. What the heck? Why? What? Many questions. Why? Remember, this is somebody's exercise of free will. Like, this was a choice. Even for me in games like Undertale, where you have more complex fonts constrained to small pixels, it was hard to read for me in many different spots, which sucks because it's a game that's very story heavy and the dialogue is important. And don't worry, I learned my lesson attacking Undertale. I'm making another video on it. What? Link's Awakening is another pixel art font that I don't really know how to feel about. It is italicized, because like we talked about, Nintendo really likes to do that. But because the letters are so far apart, my brain reads it kind of slowly and stupidly in my head. It is very pretty though, I don't know. You know, maybe you like that font a lot, I don't know. Remember, font is a very relative thing because our metric is vibes. Maybe you want to vomit when you look at Hollow Knight's UI. Maybe you hate the font they used in Stray. Maybe you love the messed up margins in Celeste. Maybe you find this Silent Hill sign absolutely terrifying. I don't know. But what I do know is that you should subscribe, because that's all that I have to talk about today. I hope you have enjoyed the absolute nerd salad that has come out of my lungs today. Hopefully I don't permanently mess up your vision of fonts. I've already done that for many people. Every time I look at a menu, I'm looking at the fonts and I'm judging it. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!